Are the shocking allegations made about Cardinal Mueller accurate? What are they? Are they reliable? Are they credible? Stick around to find out. Okay, well, there's some pretty serious accusations that have been leveled against Cardinal Mueller, and we are going to explore them today, as well as his response to them. And we're going to consider whether or not his response to the accusations are sufficient. There's a lot of accusations, so a lot of stuff to go through. But what I'll do is, after going through the accusations and going through his response, I'm then going to give a summary of the accusations, a summary of his response, and then evaluate whether or not he has sufficiently addressed the accusations against him. Look, I'm just going to shoot straight with y'all. I'm really upset right now. I'm very angry. Scripture talks about be angry, but do not sin. That's the only thing I can think about in this moment. I'm very upset. Because this stuff is serious, and it needs to be sufficiently addressed, sufficiently accounted for. And I'm going to show y'all whether or not it has been. Okay, let me go ahead and share my screen because we need to go through the accusations that have been made about Cardinal Mueller. Again, for those who may not be familiar, Cardinal Mueller, retired cardinal now, holds no office, holds no position in the church anymore. He was appointed by Pope Benedict as the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, now known as the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, once known as the Holy Office, the Holy Inquisition, the doctrinal arm of the Roman congregations. And so he was once head of that, appointed in 2012 by Pope Francis, carried through his appointment through 2017, where he was not given a second term. It wasn't renewed by Pope Francis in 2017. Of course, we know Ladaria came in after that, and then recently Cardinal Fernandez was made head of the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith. Okay, so that's who Cardinal Mueller is, for those who may not have some perspective here. Let's go ahead and dive into the accusations that have emerged because of the investigative work of the Pillar. So they put out this article about him on July 31st. So mind you, this was, 3 days ago, and you likely haven't heard anything about it. Interesting the way Catholic media works, and in international news, because if it had been some other figures, perhaps Cardinal Fernandez, you would have heard about it immediately. But being that it surrounds Cardinal Mueller, there's just not a whole lot of discussion about it. But okay, so this was released on the 31st in an article called Cardinal Mueller's Non-Renewal at DDF Followed Financial Investigation. So in other words, the title is basically suggesting that, one of the reasons why he wasn't renewed, didn't continue to be the head of the dicastery in 2017, is because of a financial investigation. And then they go into the accusations. All right, so strap in. A lot to cover here. Cardinal Mueller and the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith were investigated in 2015 amid charges of significant financial improprieties in the Vatican department. While Mueller's term as prefect was not renewed after the investigation, another DDF refers to Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, official who faced investigation remains in post at the department. Cardinal Mueller led the Vatican's doctrinal department for 5 years, following his appointment in 2012 by Benedict XVI, until July of 2017, when Pope Francis declined to renew his term of office. At the time of Mueller's departure, Francis's decision not to renew his tenure at the then Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, now Dicastery, was widely interpreted as the sacking of a prominent theological conservative in a senior curial role, and a signal that the Pope wanted a new direction from the doctrinal department's leadership. Something we all heard at the time. Pope Francis just doesn't like Mueller because Mueller is this really solid Orthodox Catholic figure. Something that is not entirely true, but that is the narrative that we heard. But sources close to the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, the Secretariat for the Economy, and the Vatican's Office of the Auditor General have independently. Let me pause. Did you hear that? 3 sources close to the DDF itself, the Secretariat for the Economy, which does these investigations, and the Vatican's Office of the Auditor General. 3 independent sources have confirmed and independently told the Pillar that Mueller's departure from office came after financial problems at the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, which led to an investigation and the cardinal being ordered by the Pope to repay hundreds of thousands of euros to his own department. It gets worse. Sources familiar with the investigation told the Pillar that tens of thousands of euros in the departmental funds were kept in cash in office drawers and used as unreceipted discretionary funds by officials. That money meant for the Dicastery's departmental bank account was instead deposited into Mueller's personal account. Full stop. Let that sink in. Money that was supposed to be in the Dicastery's bank account was instead deposited into Mueller's personal account. And that the cardinal gave a centuries-old conference table, who cares about the table, used to convene the doctrinal office's most senior meetings to a personal friend. That's just, who cares about that? This is the bigger issue, but there's actually a lot more. Okay. Cardinal Muller has not responded to questions from the Pillar. The Pillar has asked him, hey, you want to comment on any of this? And they asked him in advance, we will hold off on running this until you give us a response. And no response. According to sources close to the Secretariat for the Economy, an investigation began in 2015 as the Secretariat began implementing new norms for financial accountability. So we heard Pope Francis is going to shake things up, get all this corruption addressed. We saw Cardinal Pell was made over the Secretariat in 2014. He comes in there guns blazing. He's doing work. He's doing research. You remember later on, one of the problems is he was falsely accused of, some really bad stuff. And his name was cleared. But he spent a lot of time in jail until his name was cleared. Well, this is when all of that was going on, whenever there was a lot of investigation going on. During a series of workshops for curial officials on proper record keeping, Vatican officials discovered that several departments maintained large, undocumented, and unsecured amounts of cash, the Pillar was told, leading to a series of spot inspections at different dicasteries. This is key. They were told there's this financial corruption going on, so they start doing these spot inspections, surprise inspections. They did one on Mueller's dicastery. Watch what happens. When officials from the Secretariat for the Economy, then led by Cardinal George Pell, arrived at the offices of the dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, they discovered a DDF official attempting to remove several plastic shopping bags of cash from the premises of the office, leading to a scene one official described as extraordinary. Yeah, I'll say. Here we were counting out thousands of euros in cash in the office of the DDF, which they were trying to move out the back door in plastic bags, the official said. So spot inspection, surprise, and they walk in, and there's people just, stuffing stuff into bags, trying to sneak stuff out the back door so that they're not caught with a ton of money. Okay. It gets worse, though. It was just surreal, one says. The incident prompted Cardinal Pell to refer to the DDF or to refer the DDF to the Office of the Auditor General for a more thorough investigation. So Pell says, yeah, something's going on here. Y'all need to look more into this. For a more thorough investigation, officials told the Pillar, which was conducted in autumn of 2015, and found that hundreds of thousands of euros at the DDF were either misappropriated, improperly documented, or otherwise unaccounted for. It gets worse. One senior official of the Auditor General's office put the figure at more than €500,000 in total, much of which was in cash, they said, with the rest of the money deposited in non-CDF bank accounts, including Cardinal Muller's personal account. So, again, to recap that, money is found in his personal account, Cardinal Muller, and other non-dicastery bank accounts, not just him, and others. Not just a one-time slip, accidentally clerical error thing, but others as well. Let that sink in. According to a source close to the Auditor General's office, when Mueller was asked to explain why 200,000 euros of departmental funds were deposited into his personal bank accounts, the Cardinal blamed a clerical error with the account numbers, an explanation which the official said beggared belief. I'll say, it gets worse, though. It gets worse. It's hard to see how any kind of credible accounting process could allow for hundreds of thousands of euros to go unaccounted for, or for hundreds of thousands to be deposited in the wrong accounts, and have no one notice until there was an external investigation, the official told the Pillar. Yeah, right. A source close to the Secretariat for the Economy told the Pillar that they saw no evidence that Cardinal Muller used the departmental funds in his bank account to fund his own expenses. So they notice, well, Mueller has the funds, but he hasn't used any of it. He hasn't used any of it. So what's going on here? Why is it there? But they speculated instead that the deposits, along with the bags of cash discovered being removed from the DDF offices, were evidence of a panic as news of spot inspections spread around the Korea. Again, hold your horses. We're going to hear the other side of the story in a little bit, and I want you to tell me if it adds up. Listen, there's always two sides to every story. We have to give accused people the benefit of the doubt, judgment of charity, whether we like them or not, whether they're good people or not. You have to give them those things. There's always two sides to every story. There's even a proverb in scripture that talks about this, how, one man's case in court sounds convincing until you hear the other man come and cross-examine and you hear the counter argument. And that's so true. You've probably heard one person's side of the story and it sounds like really bad and really convincing until you hear the other person's side. And then it's like, oh, well, yeah, you didn't tell me this other stuff. So we're going to see, is that what's going on here? When we look at Cardinal Muller's response, I want y'all to tell me, are you getting that? Are you feeling like, oh, okay, well, that adds up. That makes sense. There's another side of the story. We're going to look at that. So hold your horses. But we have to cover all the allegations first. They said, I don't think Cardinal Muller was looking to get rich from the dicastery, the sources close to the Secretariat said. But I think the aim was to get all the cash, and it was a lot of cash, out of the office and out of sight. For what reason? Well, as we're going to see here in a moment, the source of this cash is somewhat unknown. Somewhat unknown. Might that be a motive to get rid of this cash real quick? When you hear there's going to be somebody tips you off, hey, they're coming for your office like right now. And so, okay, put the money in the bag, do this, do that, put the money over here. Might that be why? Maybe. Sources close to the Secretariat for the Economy and the Office of the Auditor General Auditor General both told the pillar that the findings of the investigation were presented to Pope Francis directly in the latter months of 2015. So, Pope Francis becomes aware, he's presented with the information. In response, Francis ordered Mueller to repay the money deposited into his own account, which sources told the pillar amounted approximately to 200,000 euros. This is a big part of what we're going to be examining. The claim is, in addition to many claims, money's found in his personal account that doesn't belong there. He hasn't touched the money, but it's found in his account. And then Francis is presented with the information that Francis has to tell Mueller, put that money back, pay the dicastery back. Keep that in mind in a moment. That's going to be important. By the way, why does Pope Francis have to tell you that? Anyways, on July 30th, the pillar sent Cardinal Muller several questions via email, asking him to confirm and comment upon the inspection and the amount allegedly repaid by the Cardinal. No response was received by the time of press. You're going to see that over and over throughout this article. They asked him about every bit of this before running this report. No response. By the way, he still hasn't responded to the pillar, according to what the pillar has so far reported. Just FYI. He hasn't directly responded, at least. We will see what he has said in response, but he didn't say it to the pillar. On July 30th, the pillar sent the Cardinal several questions. Okay. According to sources close to the DDF, Mueller's tenure as head of the doctrinal department was well known for financial mismanagement and the very casual treatment of dicastery funds. So they're saying he was known for this. One source close to the department told the pillar that as much as 100,000 euros at a time was kept in cash in an office with virtually no formal oversight of its use. Now, let me ask you a question. Do you ever need 100,000 euros in cash? Like, if you're going to have maybe some get together, maybe you're going to take everybody out from the dicastery out to Outback or something. Or you're going to go to Denny's. You're going to go to whatever the equivalent there is in Italy, right? You're going to go to that. Do you need 100,000 in cash for that? 100K in cash? Can't use credit, can't use check or something else. You got to have cash. It's necessary. By the way, where did that cash come from? Those are questions to ask. What was the source of that cash? Where did we get that from? Certainly worth exploring. Sources close to the DDF told the pillar that the thousands of euros identified by financial authorities' investigation came from taxa, formal administrative fees, collected by the DDF for the processing of canonical cases in the department's disciplinary section. 100,000 in cash from, administrative fees. And you need it all right there in cash. It can't be in the correct bank account. Under Archbishop Charles C. Colonna, during his time as head of the disciplinary office, one DDF official recalled, we would keep a small amount of petty cash in the office for ordinary expenses. You want to go to, Dunkin' Donuts or something. And an office dinner, maybe once a year, take them out to Denny's for the disciplinary section. When he left after being made a bishop in his native Malta, though, the money just started accumulating. Interesting. Okay. According to sources close to the DDF and the Office of the Auditor General, the money accumulated in the office of a single administrative official, Monsignor Mauro Ugolini. So kept in his office. Okay. I don't think anyone, including the administrator, could tell you how much was there or came in or out. And one DDF official recalled, but it was in the hundreds of thousands. There was something like 80,000 euros in cash left when it was finally discovered during the Secretariat's inspection. By the way, this is what was discovered. You got to ask questions like, wait, what about cash flow and money that wasn't discovered because it had potentially gone through this system And we just don't know about it because there was no surprise inspection to pop up at the moment and uncover it. You got to ask those questions too. So when you hear 200,000 in his account, when you hear 80,000 kept in cash, you can't think, oh, that's all it was. No, that's what they found. That's what they ended up uncovering at that time. In previous decades, it was customary for visiting bishops and other senior church officials to make generous cash donations, informally called bustarella. Yeah, gee, that isn't open to corruption. And it would be made to prefects of Roman dicasteries, often leaving it ambiguous as to whether the funds were personal gifts or donations to the department. Right. Such donations were banned by reforms issued by Pope Francis in the wake of the 2018 scandal surrounding former Cardinal Theodore McCarrick, and rightly so. But sources close to the DDF told the Pillar that the thousands of euros identified by financial authorities' investigation were not bustarella, but part of the dicastery's administrative income from canonical cases, including instances of clerical sexual abuse of minors. That's weird. Canonical marriage cases undertaken according to the Petrine and Pauline privilege, also weird, as well as cases involving the violation of the sacramental seal, also weird. Another instance of financial maladministration detailed by the Auditor General's report concerned a large antique conference table that formed the centerpiece of the main conference hall in the DDF offices. I don't care about that. I don't care about some stupid table, but it's thrown in there. According to sources at both the Auditor General's office and the DDF, Cardinal Muller ordered a new modern-style table for the room priced at tens of thousands of euros in exchange gave the antique conference table to a Bavarian-based furniture maker and antique dealer, allegedly a personal friend of Mueller's. Okay. All right. That's pales in comparison to the bigger issues. To see the antique dealer come in and disassemble the table around which so much history had taken place, at which Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger had presided, was very affecting for everyone, one DDF official recalled to the Pillar. So they were really attached to the table. Apart from the questions about the relative value of the old and new conference tables, the arrangement was flagged by the investigation because the antique table, along with all curial furnishings, did not belong to the dicastery, and the prefect did not have the authority to dispose of it. All Vatican furnishings and art are owned centrally by a separate office of the Roman Curia, the APSA. The Pillar asked Cardinal Muller via email to comment and confirm the acquisition of the new conference table and the disposal of the antique table. By the time of press, no response was received. Right. You're going to see that again over and over. Despite the findings of the Secretariat for the Economy and the Auditor General's investigation, neither Cardinal Muller nor Monsignor Ugolini was subject to formal sanction. The Pillar was told by officials at the DDF, Secretariat for the Economy, and the Office of the Auditor General. So no formal sanctions. Despite everything you just heard, no formal sanctions. If Pope Francis's financial reforms were applied to the letter, they should have meant that Mueller was sacked. Like he should have immediately been fired, said one senior source close to the Office of the Auditor General. If thousands and thousands of euros just accidentally ended up in a cardinal's account, isn't evidence of inexcusable administration, if not corruption, what is? Right. Yeah. Yeah. Fair question. But an official close to the Secretariat for the Economy told the Pillar that in 2015, the early days of Pope Francis's financial reforms, there was a preference for looking ahead and not looking back. Don't know if that one aged well. Very few dicasteries didn't have problems. Yikes. Very few had situations as bad as the CDF. But if heads started rolling everywhere, it would make it harder to get people to come clean about where we really were. Okay, so, one of the reasons why heads didn't roll, including Mueller at the time, is because, well, people would be less willing to come out and say, hey, well, we got some problems over here, That ain't good. Okay. One source close to the DDF told the Pillar that the investigation split responsibility for the numerous financial issues at the department between Mueller and Ugolini, but both men were allowed to remain in post. Mueller until the end of his 5-year term of office in 2017. Ugolini until he reaches curial retirement age, believed to be next year. So he's still there. Maybe I hope, by the way, that Cardinal Fernandez is paying attention to this situation. Cardinal Muller wasn't fired, though perhaps, strictly speaking, he should have been, the senior official told the Pillar. The politics of the day kept him from being removed. Interesting. But the financial mess was substantially why he was not renewed in office. At the time his term was not renewed, Cardinal Muller complained publicly about the way he was informed that he was leaving office. So whenever his term wasn't renewed, Mueller was publicly complaining about it. A brief meeting with Pope Francis in which he said he was informed he would not be given a second 5-year term in office, and apparently he was given no explanation for the Pope's decision. Mueller said, quote, "I cannot accept this way of doing things. As a bishop, one cannot treat people this way." Mueller complained to media in Bavaria at the time. Pope Francis didn't give a reason. But he was upset. He was like, Pope shouldn't treat me this way. The church's social teaching must also be applied to the way employees are treated here in Rome, Mueller says in an interview in 2017. But he made no reference to either the Secretariat for the Economy's inspection, the Auditor General's report, nor having previously been directed to repay thousands of euros to the DDF by Pope Francis. Oops, we left that one out. I want you to let that sink in. Let that sink in. Let that sink in. Hundreds of thousands of dollars found in your personal bank account. You didn't spend it, but it's in your account. All this wild stuff going on with cash at the office. People trying to smuggle it out the back door at your dicastery's office. You're then ordered to pay the money back. These are all the accusations. You're ordered to pay them back. But when Pope Francis doesn't renew your term, although he didn't fire him immediately, he doesn't renew his term in 2017, like 2 years after this investigation, and doesn't tell him why he doesn't renew it, he's upset. He's like, I shouldn't be treated this way. That's interesting. And he says I shouldn't be treated this way, but left out all this other stuff. Huh. That's fascinating. Okay. Well, we'll hear his side of the story here in a moment. You tell me if it adds up. Mueller was succeeded at the DDF by his deputy, then Archbishop and later Cardinal Luis Ladaria Ferrer, in a move widely interpreted as reflecting theological differences between Mueller and Francis. Mueller was also widely reported at the time to have turned down the offer of another curial assignment, which one source close to the Secretariat for the Economy told the Pillar was normal for moving a cardinal after evidence of maladministration. Generally speaking, when the Secretariat found a serious issue that couldn't be overlooked, there was a default to the Roman tradition of promoting to remove. That is what happened with Cardinal Becciu at the Secretariat of State. It wasn't up to the Secretariat, but that's how often it went. Atrocious. Atrocious. Kind of reminds you of that policy that was going on of somebody is, found to be doing some wild stuff sexually with certain people. Well, just move them around to a different location. News reporting at the time of Mueller's departure suggested that the cardinal had turned down another Vatican role because after leading the DDF, any other position would have appeared to be a demotion. That was kind of the narrative at the time. The Pillar requested comment from Cardinal Muller on the circumstances of his departure from the office, and for his opinion on what, if any, influence the financial affairs that the DDF may have had on the Pope's decision. No response was received by time of press. Following his departure from office, Mueller emerged as a public critic of Pope Francis, claiming that the Pope had uttered plenty of material heresies and criticizing the growing confusion about the doctrine of the faith. Now, I have in the show notes about 4 different videos I've done where I've showed that Cardinal Muller does not follow the magisterium in some cases. He is a dissenter. He's a public dissenter, violating Dona Veritatis and many other principles of the magisterium, accuses the papacy of heresy, wrongfully accuses the papacy of heresy, publicly criticizes fiducia supplicans with dubious arguments, was involved in that whole dubia fiasco. I've covered all this on the channel There's some very problematic aspects to Cardinal Muller. I've covered all that. Go check the show notes, videos on all that. But let me say this. Look, even if you are a dissenter, even if you're doing some wild stuff with dubias and you're being disingenuous, it would seem in some cases, that doesn't mean that you're guilty of financial corruption. That doesn't mean that every accusation against you is legitimate. So, although I recognize there are some problems with Mueller, I don't jump the gun and say, well, the accusations have to be true. No, because it's possible for a person to be a dissenter and not guilty of corruption. It's possible. So you can't jump to conclusions. I want to encourage everybody, don't jump to conclusions. Weigh all of the evidence that we're hearing here in a moment. That we're seeing here. And then what we're going to see in a moment is his response. And then I want you to ask, did he sufficiently address the allegations? That's what you need to base this on, not based on what you think about his orthodoxy or heterodoxy elsewhere. So let me be the first to say that. Just because one is heterodox elsewhere, just because one is problematic elsewhere, doesn't mean you're automatically guilty of anything that people accuse you of, including financial corruption. Please keep that in mind. You have to give people the benefit of the doubt, weigh things fairly. So, in December last year, Mueller published an essay denouncing his former department's declaration, Fiducia Supplicans, which offered a framework for clerical blessings of individuals in same-sex couples. Right. And I showed how bogus his arguments were. They were really terrible. And I showed how problematic they were. Again, videos in the show notes. Go and watch all that. Shortly before Mueller's term was not renewed in 2017, the then Auditor General, Libero Malone, was forced to resign from office under the threat of criminal prosecution by the then Sostituto of the Vatican Secretariat of State, Cardinal Becciu. Malone is currently suing the Secretariat of State and his former office for wrongful dismissal. We'll probably have to do a whole show on this, by the way. The article continues. The Pillar requested comment from Malone on his former office's work involving Cardinal Muller and the DDF. In response, he did respond. Malone responded. Mueller didn't, but Malone responded to the DDF. The Pillar, and said that it is not appropriate to comment on the matter because at the present time I have a court proceeding in progress with the Vatican City Tribunal, and it's essential for me to focus on this matter, Malone said. Fair enough. That's legit. You got litigation going on. That makes sense. Malone previously told the Pillar that Becciu accused him of spying because his office was undertaking legitimate auditing work, and that he had personally briefed Pope Francis on curial corruption. What it was, Malone told the Pillar in 2022, is that I discovered there were cardinals putting money in their pockets. Talk about infiltration. Cardinals putting money in their pockets. They were doing strange things. And my reporting line was to the Pope. So I reported everything to the Pope. I remember him talking about this. He had multiple meetings with the Pope directly. Becciu was himself sacked from his curial roles in September of 2022. I covered that on the show. And forced to resign the rights and privileges of a cardinal. He was convicted of financial crimes by a Vatican City court in December of 2023. Got a show on that one. He has publicly taken credit for ousting Malone, but insisted he did so on Pope Francis's personal orders. Now, there's some stuff that could be questioned there because Becciu's claims, not so reliable. Speaking at a press conference in 2022, Malone said his work as Auditor General uncovered the misappropriation of hundreds of thousands of euros by individual cardinals and prelates. So Malone had uncovered this stuff. Fictitious building projects used to justify expenses, and the use of a church institution to allegedly launder money to Italian political parties. Malone has also charged that doing that work successfully resulted in him losing his job. So the reason why Malone says he lost his job is because he had a direct line to the Pope and he was showing that cardinals are pocketing money. Evidently, Becciu and his friends must have come across these reports because he was the Pope's chief of staff at the time and worried because this guy was putting these cardinals in difficulty. regarding one cardinal and one in particular who took a lot. Now, ask yourself who this might be. Okay, in light of everything we just heard, just ask the question, who does this maybe sound like? Who fits the bill here? Regarding one cardinal, one in particular, who took a lot of money, when I informed the Pope went through the roof and said to go see him and get the money back. Now, who does that sound like? Now, you remember earlier we just read the allegation was money found, 200,000 found in Mueller's account. Mueller was forced to put it back, told to put it back by Pope Francis. So, is there a similarity here? I said that's not my job, and it wasn't my job. My job was auditor. I'm not there to collect money, Malone said in 2022. All right. But the Pope said, I'll tell him. You just go and explain how you found out. And the Cardinal did give the money back. Who does that sound like? Is there more than one Cardinal who had hundreds of thousands of dollars of euros found in his account, and then the Pope had to go and tell him to pay it back? Who else does it sound like? Is there anybody else that fits the bill? Interesting. But these are the reasons for which I was apparently accused of spying. So in other words, Malone uncovered this stuff, lost his job because he was finding out that cardinals were stashing this stuff in their private accounts. That's what he says. Malone declined to comment on whether, on when asked whether the situation he described in 2022 was Cardinal Muller. Well, you read between the lines. Of course, he couldn't comment on it. But does that fit the bill? He filed suit in Vatican City in 2022. In a January 22 decision, earlier this year, the Vatican City's Court of First Instance rejected the claims made by Malone and by his recently deceased former deputy, Panico, over their ousting from office in 2017. While the court did not conclude that Malone and Panico had been rightly forced from their jobs in 2017, the judges rejected the argument that the Secretary of State was liable for their ouster, loss of earnings, and subsequent damage for their reputations. So they did say that, well, it's not because of the Secretary of State. The judges ruled that Malone's own narrative of his ousting placed responsibility on the senior leadership of Vatican City's Corps of Gendarmes, which did not create a chain of liability for the Secretary of State, despite the then number 2 official in the department, Cardinal Becciu, publicly acknowledging his involvement. The case is currently being heard at appeal. It says something about a culture of clericalism and the real commitment to financial reform that Malone was forced out of his job, while Cardinal Muller was given a graceful exit and allowed to finish his term, one official close to the office of the Auditor General told the Pillar. Interesting the way that worked, right? He was allowed to save face while this other guy's tossed out. If you accidentally, quote unquote, air quotes, take thousands of euros from the office funds, you don't lose your position. So, well, 200,000 ends up in Cardinal Muller's account. Well, okay, just put the money back. But if you push too hard for accountability, you get threatened with criminal prosecution and made to resign. Fair point. Fair point. Okay. Now, that's one side of the story. Now we're going to get to consider the other side of the story. All right, always two sides. Let's hear what Cardinal Muller has said in response to this. Then I'm going to give a recap of everything, a summary of everything that we've seen, and I'm going to consider, did he answer all of the objections, or even the most serious ones against him? And I'm going to offer some concluding thoughts. So stick around, coming right back. I'm going to take a quick break, and then we will continue with what Cardinal Muller has said in response. I want to remind y'all, hit that subscribe button. If you haven't already, go ahead, hit subscribe. I really do appreciate it if you will support the channel. Also consider supporting me at Patreon. my Patreon account, which is patreon.com/reason and theology. Okay, we'll be right back. For years, I've tirelessly defended the Catholic magisterium, despite pushback from numerous people slandering this ministry, misrepresenting it, and calling for its cancellation. Our situation today is very similar to the days of St. Maximus the Confessor, who was constantly pressured to deviate from the teachings of Rome and embrace the heresies that many other bishops were promoting. He was exiled, ridiculed, slandered, but he stood fast despite this persecution, which also included the imperial court of Constantinople cutting off his arm and ripping out his tongue so that he could no longer write the truth and speak the truth. It can be costly to speak the truth and defend the papacy in an age that is so hostile towards it, just like during the days of St. Maximus. But this is what we are called to do. This is the faith and tradition of our forefathers. I plead for all Catholics to stand up for our church and defend it. And consider supporting this channel that has been vindicated by Rome's decisions time after time again. You can do that by subscribing and supporting this ministry at patreon.com/reason and theology or reasonandtheology.locals.com. There's also a PayPal and a GoFundMe link in the description of this video. God bless. All right, so let's go ahead and continue here. 1 second. Okay, let me share my screen. Let's see Cardinal Muller's response. So, posted today by The Pillar. The Pillar describes Muller's response. Now, he did not respond to The Pillar. Still hasn't responded directly to the persons who have originated the accusations, or not originated, but reported them. But they go over his responses that Muller gave elsewhere. So, Cardinal Muller, the former prefect of the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith, has issued a series of statements following a report by The Pillar detailing a financial inspection and investigation of his former department in 2015. The Cardinal acknowledged that the Vatican department he had led kept unusually large amounts of cash in the office, but he did not address reports of the large sums transferred into his personal account or that Pope Francis ordered him to repay the funds. Now, let me give you a quick analogy before we really look at all this. Let me give you an analogy. Let's say you're accused of being caught with a body in the trunk of your car, a prostitute in the front seat, and some weed in your vehicle. For states where that's illegal, right? Okay. Now, let's say you come out and you respond to these accusations and you say, well, I had some weed, but it was actually legal in the state that I was in at the moment. But you don't address the accusation about the dead body in the trunk and the prostitute in the front seat. What does that tell you? I'll let you draw the conclusions. So again, the Cardinal acknowledged that the Vatican department, he had kept unusually large amounts of cash in the office, but did not address reports of the large sums transferred into his personal account or that Pope Francis ordered him to repay the funds. It gets worse. The cardinal, who left office in 2017 following the decision by Pope Francis to not renew his 5-year term of office, sent different statements in different languages to media outlets, though none directly to the pillar. So let that be forefront in your mind. The people who are reporting the information doesn't respond directly to them, even though he has had multiple opportunities. But, you know, responds in a couple languages to some other outlets. Prior to publication of its original report, the pillar sent detailed questions to Cardinal Muller, offering to hold publication pending any response to the cardinal that he wished to make, but received no response. In an English language statement not originally sent to the pillar, Cardinal Muller said his former department had not lost a single penny during his tenure, and called the pillar's report artfully mounted as in cheap investigative literature. Let me give you another analogy based on that. Okay. His deal is, not a penny was lost, though. So let's say I come to your house. All of a sudden I find out in your house, you got a ton of my money. A ton of my money is in your house. And I say, how did this get here? And then I say, give me my money back. And I take my money back. And then you just say, well, you got all your money back. What's the problem? Okay, well, how did my money get to your house? First of all, that's one of the problems. And number two, yeah, I got my money back because I found out that you had it and I made you give it back. But you didn't lose a penny though, right? Yeah, because I found out that you took my money and then I made you give it back. And you didn't explain how the money got there. I have to assume you took it. And you never confirmed that it was like, oh, actually it was this third party who stole it from your house and then they just happened to drop it by my house for some unknown reason. You don't address any of that. You just want to say, but you didn't lose a single penny though. It's kind of like that person you're riding in a car with them. They almost kill you, but you didn't die though. Yeah, but I could have died. So that's kind of what this reminds me of. Okay. Not a single penny was lost during his tenure. And he says, you know what? The pillar and their accusations, you know what? It's just cheap investigative literature. That's all it is. It's just cheap shots. And he says, I'm very grateful that someone felt compelled to tell the relevant press organs an old story dating back to 2015. So obviously the Cardinal's being sarcastic, right? Obviously he's not grateful that anybody told the press about this. He's not happy about that. He's not happy that they're discussing questions of financial corruption. I mean, you would think that he would be happy about that, right? You would think that he would be happy because this would show transparency. Well, he's not happy. I'm very grateful that someone felt compelled to tell the relevant press organs an old story dating back to 2015 when I was at the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Muller said the events detailed in the Pillars report had long since been clarified. So this old stuff, it's already been clarified. And the then prefect of the Secretariat for the Economy, Cardinal George Pell, had concluded that the congregation had not lost a single penny in the budget. But you got your money back though, right? You didn't lose any of your money, right? Maybe you found it in my house and you didn't give me permission to take it to your house or my house. And you had to confront me on it and get the money back. But you didn't lose a penny though, right? Okay. There are the papers to prove it. Like, man, I got a videotape where I gave you your money back. It was found in my house, but I got like, it's right here on my phone. I took a video of me giving you the money back. I'm proof it. I'm proof I gave you your money back. There are papers to prove it, the Cardinal said. To claim otherwise and speciously divulge it is to violate the 8th commandment, bearing false witness. I mean, Dude, I got videos of me giving you your money back that you found in my house. To act otherwise is to be like bearing false witness and stuff. You can't make this up. Only July 31st, the Pillar reported that during an inspection of the dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith by the Secretariat for the Economy in 2015, Secretariat officials discovered DDF officials attempting to remove several plastic bags containing tens of thousands of euros in cash from the office ahead of their inspection. The Pillar also reported that hundreds of thousands of euros in cash were left to accumulate in the office of a single departmental official without proper records kept of where it originated from, like where it came from or how it was used. But bro, you got your money back. What's the problem? These statements from Cardinal Muller did not address the attempt to remove bags of cash from the DDF offices immediately prior to an inspection, but said that an official whom he called a figure of great rectitude and proven experience had inventoried in a somewhat confused way, we would say haphazardly compared to the standards later adopted, incoming money related to the dicastery's work. Does that account for the concerns? Honest question. Does that address? The Cardinal said that the funds were kept in a safe, and although the money should have gone immediately into the congregation's account, there was never anything illegal about it. Well, bro, just because you found your money in my house doesn't mean it was illegal and you got your money back. The Cardinal said that the funds were kept in a safe. He had kept an unusually large amount of cash, but he had not allowed the smallest part of the congregation's assets to be lost. You found your money in my house, but all the money's here. Like, I didn't spend any of it. Right? And this is the truth, Muller says. I mean, all of it's right here under my bed. I didn't spend any of it. So what's your problem? In a differently worded Spanish language statement printed in full by the website Info Vaticana, Muller said that the resurfacing of this story, which was already clarified 9 years ago, obviously has no informational purpose, but is clearly defamatory. This is just, it's a hit piece against him. It's already been addressed. It's already been 9 years ago. This was addressed. Like, why bring this out is just to defame me. Did any of y'all know this, by the way? Was any of this addressed 9 years ago for y'all? Just curious. Anybody in the chat, did y'all know about this for the last 9 years? Was this addressed for y'all? Did Mueller address this for y'all 9 years ago? Honest question. In all of these statements seen so far by the Pillar, Cardinal Muller did not address the Pillar's report that Vatican financial authorities had discovered large sums of departmental money in his personal bank accounts, and the following report by the Office of the Auditor General and the Secretary for the Economy, Pope Francis, had ordered the Cardinal to repay some 200,000 euros to the department. So, again, going back to the body in the trunk analogy, you got a prostitute in the front seat, you got a body in the trunk, and there's some weed in your ashtray in the car, right? And you're like, but I didn't smoke any of the weed. Okay, all right. What about the prostitute in the front seat? What about the dead body in the trunk? It's already been addressed 9 years ago. It's just defamation. I didn't inhale. The Pillar also reported, citing multiple sources familiar with the situation, that Mueller had explained that situation was the result of clerical error involving account numbers. Does that sound right to y'all? Yeah, 200,000 found in my personal account. Guys, that's a clerical error. It's also found in non-DDF accounts. Clerical error. Yeah, there's like 100,000 in bro's office over here in cash, but clerical error involving account numbers. because that happens all the time. The Cardinal did not address those reports in his statements. Mueller separately told the German news agency DPA that the Pillars of reports amounted to typical intrigue and an extraordinarily hurtful campaign, which he said falls on the conscience of those who use reputational damage as a means of their church politics. So in other words, those who are raising these accusations, it's defamation. And you know what? You're going to be judged by God. You're going to be judged by God for this one day, for raising these concerns. You're going to be judged. Okay. In his English language statement, the Cardinal said the events reported by the Pillar give the reader who does not have the totality of the information the impression that I got rich with church money. Was that the concern of the Pillar? Honest question, y'all. I just read to y'all what the Pillar raised as far as concerns. Did they raise a concern that the Cardinal was getting rich? Was that the focus of the concerns? Or is this gaslighting? He said people don't have the totality of the information. They got the impression that I'm just trying to get rich with church money. This is untrue, totally untrue. Totally untrue and unrelated to any of my actions and convictions. So it's like saying, again, going back to the car analogy, well, people got the impression that I was inhaling the weed. I didn't inhale the weed. I didn't inhale. This isn't good. Citing sources close to the Secretariat for the Economy, the Pillar reported that no evidence was discovered that Mueller attempted to enrich himself with curial funds. Right. So you find a dude has your money under his mattress, but I mean, he didn't spend any of the money yet. Don't know if he was going to. Maybe it was a big joke. He was going to give you the money back later, and he was never going to use it. It was just an error. It was a clerical error. One of his friends accidentally brought it over to his house, but he didn't use any of the money. Instead, the Pillar reported officials concluded the attempt to remove large sums of cash from the DDF's offices and the depositing of large sums of office money in the Cardinal's accounts were the result of a panic ahead of possible financial inspection. So panic because maybe people are going to ask questions. Where'd this money come from? And why is it in cash? And why is it in dude's office over here? And why is it in the Cardinal's account? I don't think Cardinal Muller was looking to get rich from the dicastery, the Pillar quoted, but I think the aim was to get all the cash, and it was a lot of cash out of the office and out of sight. You remember they said that, right? In his Spanish language statement, Cardinal Muller claimed the Pillar's report, which cited independent sources across 3 Vatican departments, had been constructed to explain Pope Francis's decision not to renew Mueller's term of office at the CDF in 2017. So here's what Mueller says. Here's what he says is really happening here, okay? Since we're often confronted with the question of why the former professor of theology of Munich and Bishop of Regensburg, appointed by Benedict XVI at the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, was not reelected in office only after 5 years, we have to build a financial scandal, as in a cheap detective novel, the Cardinal said. So according to the Cardinal, you know what? This is all just defamation, shoddy detective work. And then people are just coming up with a financial scandal because they're just trying to figure out why, Pope Francis didn't renew my term in 2017. That's what this is about. Okay. Does that have explanatory power, as they say in apologetics? Does that sufficiently account for all the evidence? The Pillar's report cited sources close to the DDF, the Office of the Auditor General, and the Secretariat for the Economy, who all concluded that the results of the 2015 financial inspection could have led to Mueller's dismissal from office, but that instead he was allowed to complete his 5-year term. Now, I mean, if you're Pope and you don't immediately fire the guy, are you going to renew his term? when it comes to 2017? Or are you going to kind of feel like, all right, I'll let him save face, but I'm not going to renew his term in 2017? Does that have explanatory power? Cardinal Muller wasn't fired, though perhaps strictly speaking, he should have been, said a senior DDF official. The politics of the day kept him from being removed, but the financial mess was substantially why he was not renewed in office. This comes from a senior DDF official, someone high up at the dicastery for the doctrine of the faith. Someone high up, not hearsay, someone high up. I think we know who that is, or at least one of two options of who that is. A senior secretariat for the economy official told the Pillar that in 2015, as a broad curio of financial reforms were getting underway, there was a preference for looking ahead, not back, and there was an understanding that even serious issues regarding financial administration were not dealt with by summary dismissal from office. A shame, by the way. We see how well that worked. If heads started rolling everywhere, it would have made it harder to get people to come clean about where we really were, the Pillar was told. Instead, the source said it was normal for a cardinal to be moved on after evidence of maladministration. So, in other words, that's not just the case with Mueller. It's also normal in reference to other cardinals. Who else did Pope Francis not renew? Who else was a senior cardinal that Pope Francis didn't renew? I'll let you figure that one out. Okay, so it says, news reporting at the time of Mueller's departure suggested that the cardinal had turned down another Vatican role because after leading the DDF, any other position would have appeared to be a demotion. Mueller said in 2017 that he had been given no explanation for Francis's decision not to renew his term of office, a situation he called unacceptable. But he left all this other stuff out. It's like Vigano, right? He wants to make all these accusations about Pope Francis in relation to McCarrick, but then like he leaves out all of the information showing involvement between Vigano and McCarrick. I went into that in a 3-hour episode, giving all the receipts for that and showing, oh, wow. So Vigano had a whole lot of responsibility here with the whole McCarrick thing and kind of left all that stuff out in 2018. All right. Francis's decision not to extend Mueller's term was widely interpreted as a reflection of theological differences between Mueller and Francis. One specific instance detailed in the Pillar's report, which Cardinal Muller did address directly in his English and Spanish language statements, concerned the replacement of an antique conference table. Let me get this straight. Hold on. So he does address the accusation about a stupid table at the DDF. He's going to address that, but he doesn't address the body in the trunk accusation, such as 200,000 euros was found in your personal account and Pope Francis had to tell you to put it back. You don't address that, but you want to talk about a stupid table at the DDF? You want to talk about that? So again, going back to the analogy, you'll talk about the weed found in your car, but not the body in the trunk and the prostitute in the passenger seat. So in reference to the stupid table, an antique conference table, which was the centerpiece of the dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith's main meeting hall, in which the members of the dicastery met formally. In reference to that, citing sources of both DDF and the Office of the Auditor General, the Pillar reported that the antique table had been disposed of by Mueller, who had gave it to an antique furniture restorer and dealer, allegedly a personal friend of the Cardinal. In its place, the Cardinal commissioned a modern table priced at tens of thousands of euros. Sources at both the DDF and Auditor General's office told the Pillar this incident had been flagged because the antique table was the property of the Holy See, managed by the APSA and not the dicastery. In his statement, Cardinal Muller addresses that little accusation. He said that he had independently raised money for the new table and claimed he had APSA's permission for the removal of the antique table, which he called dilapidated. though he did not address directly claims that it was given as a gift to a friend. So you're going to talk about the stupid table, but you can't at least address everything involved with the stupid table. You have to laugh, not to cry. I hope to have unraveled. This is the kicker. Okay. This is the kicker for y'all. Please pay attention to this. After everything you've heard, this is what Mueller says. I hope to have unraveled every aspect of this alleged ministry, shedding light and total transparency and honesty on what happened. I thank you for the opportunity to have been able to clarify everything. Let me ask you a question. Did he clarify everything? Let me ask you another question. Did he clarify even the most substantive claims here? Let me ask you, was he fully transparent? Let me ask you, did he truly unravel every aspect of this alleged ministry or mystery? If the body's in your trunk, there's a prostitute in your passenger seat, there's some weed in the ashtray in the car, and all you do is address the weed in the ashtray and say, I didn't inhale, and you ignore everything else, and then you say, I addressed everything. I hope I address every aspect of this alleged mystery. And people are just defaming me. Does that honestly address everything? Now, it is possible that Mueller is completely innocent. That's possible. It's possible that Mueller has an explanation for all this. Maybe Mueller will come out and say, yeah, there was never any money in my account. Interesting that he doesn't say that. Maybe he'll come out and say, Pope Francis never told me to put that money back. Interesting he doesn't say that. But maybe he would. Maybe he could come out and say that. It's possible, right? It's possible. You can go out on a limb here. Possible. But he didn't do that. He didn't respond to those. Talks about the stupid table. He says, yeah, we kept a lot of cash. Doesn't address all of the other issues surrounding the question of the cash, but says, yeah, there was a lot of cash, but it's just kind of, people mishandling things. They had a haphazard way of handling things. I hope I put to rest everything. People are just defaming me. So again, it's possible there's some further explanations here. Possible he's innocent, but what this means is he hasn't sufficiently cleared his name against 3 independent accusers that are presenting some very substantive and weighty accusations. So he hasn't sufficiently explained this. If he has an explanation, he hasn't addressed it, and it's incredibly conspicuous that he hasn't addressed those things, and it's even more damaging that he's pretending that he somehow has. So I want to give the benefit of the doubt and say, possible there's some big misunderstanding here, but whether that's plausible is a different question. I want to summarize what we've seen so far and then give some thoughts. Let's summarize the accusations, and then let's summarize his response, and then let's see what's still left on the table. Okay? So if Mueller decides to speak about this in the future, which he needs to, if he decides to speak about this in the future, I'll give you a list of things he needs to address. Okay, so quick summary of accusations. The accusations are money that was meant for the dicastery was deposited into Mueller's personal account, $200,000 or euros. Other money deposited into non-DDF bank accounts, so not just his personal bank account, but other non-dicastery bank accounts, tens of thousands of euros, up to 100,000 of euros, kept in cash in office drawers, used as unreceipted discretionary funds. Mueller was ordered by Pope Francis to repay $200,000, euros back to the dicastery accounts. DDF official was caught in a surprise inspection attempting to remove out of the back door multiple plastic shopping bags of cash. Hundreds of thousands of funds either misappropriated, improperly documented, or otherwise unaccounted for. Now, also, the accusations include Mueller gave away a valuable DDF item to a personal friend without authority to do so. Mueller was known for financial mismanagement, and then Mueller asked directly about this by the pillar, was asked directly, straight up, didn't respond. Those are the accusations that have been made. By the way, I just have to throw out some irony here. It's funny that Mueller wanted to play these little dubia games. I documented all that in detail. Helm, Berg, Zinn, and a few others played this little dubia game that Fernandez called them out for, rightly so. They played these little dubia games with Pope Francis. Interesting. They want, responses and answers. Dubia means questions. Send these questions to the Pope. They want answers to their questions, but then whenever Mueller is sent a dubia, if you will, a list of questions by the pillar, I'm not going to respond directly to them. Interesting the way that works. Okay, so that's a summary of the accusations, and they are accusations. Let's see what he responded to. He admitted he kept large amounts of cash in the office, or that they kept large amounts of cash in the office. Admitted large amounts were kept in a safe when they should have immediately been put into DDF accounts. Okay, admits that. Then the DDF table was given away with the appropriate permission, he says. So he addresses that. And he says the DDF has not lost a single penny. The accusations made against him, just typical intrigue, already addressed 9 years ago. The accusations are artfully mounted as in cheap investigative literature. The accusations are clearly defamatory. The accusations are extraordinarily hurtful campaign, and it falls on the conscience of those who use reputational damage as a means of their church politics. The reports about him are bearing false witness, sins against the eighth commandment. Interesting that he bears false witness against Pope Francis. Oh, did I say that? Oh, yeah. Yeah, go and watch all those videos where I address how he falsely accuses the magisterium multiple times. But tabling that issue, claims that the accusations are because we're often confronted with the question of why the former professor of theology of Munich and the Bishop of Regensburg, appointed by Benedict XVI at the head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith, was not reelected in office, and only after 5 years. We have to build a financial scandal, as in a cheap detective novel. Then he's sarcastic and dismissive of the claims. I'm very grateful that someone felt compelled to tell the relevant press organs an old story dating back to 2015, when I was head of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. Oh, interesting. Kind of like you guys dug up old stories about Fernandez from like 30 years ago. Oh, I didn't say that. I'm sorry. So he then claims he hopes he has unraveled every aspect of this alleged mystery, shedding light and total transparency and honesty of what happened. So you saw the accusations. You saw his response. What did he leave out? The money in his account, 200,000 euros in his account, left out that accusation, left out the accusation about being ordered to repay the money ordered by Pope Francis. So he wants to say not a penny was lost, but doesn't address the fact that, okay, but they found the money in your account and you were told to give it back. Doesn't address the attempt to remove bags of cash from the DDF offices during a surprise inspection. Doesn't address hundreds of thousands of euros in cash were left to accumulate in the office of a single departmental official without proper records kept of where it originated or how it was used. It's a quote from the pillar. Didn't address the table that was given to a personal friend, although he addressed that he had permission to give away a dilapidated table, but not the aspect of to a personal friend. Interesting that he decides to address that stupid claim, that little petty claim, but not the 200,000 in his account, not the Pope Francis told me to have to pay that money back. Okay, there's just some things that were left out. Make of that what you will. Maybe he'll come back out and he'll say, hey, well, okay, sorry, I forgot to address those things. All right, let me address them real quick. All right, here's the deal. Blah, 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 and go through each one of these. Hopefully he'll do that. And you know what? If he has a legitimate response, I will be the first person to immediately come here on YouTube and say, hey, y'all, here's what he said in response. And you know what? Checks out. Checks out. God bless him. I'll be the first person to do that. If he doesn't do that, and he plays that game that Vigano played whenever the Vatican came with receipts against him and showed that he had a lot of involvement with McCarrick, and Vigano just tried to dismiss it by addressing a few things here and there, small things that are really irrelevant, and then ignoring everything else and just saying, people are slandering me, and that was it. If he pulls a Vigano, then you already know what this is. So we'll see how he responds. Let's give him the benefit of the doubt, even though it may be implausible. Let's do that. It's possible he's innocent. But I have some sincere questions for him. Honest to God questions I really want y'all to consider. If the surprise inspection and the investigation that was made here, if the surprise inspection and the investigation had not made these discoveries, what would have happened to the money that was allegedly in the safe, petty cash that was there in the office, and that was also found allegedly in Mueller's account? What would have happened to it? So you find your friend has all your money under his mattress, but bro, I didn't spend $1 of it. Here's your money back. Okay, but what would have happened if I didn't find my money under your mattress? Yeah, you didn't spend any of my money, but what would have happened if I didn't find it? Would you have spent that money? Honest, sincere question. What would have happened? You think he would have came out and said, clerical error. Let me put that back. Put that back. Y'all stop playing around with that safe. Take that money out of the safe, put it in the right account. This other money that's in these other accounts, take that out of there, put it in there. Would that have happened? Honest question. Now, another question for y'all. If this story had not been about Cardinal Muller, it had been about Cardinal Fernandez, would this be all over international news and on every single Catholic blog, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all your infiltration YouTubers? Would they be talking about this right now if it had been about Fernandez? Another question for you to consider. So how come Catholic media was able to dig up a ton of stuff about Cardinal Fernandez's kissy book, but not this about Mueller? They could find some stupid book that Fernandez wrote when he was a priest from like forever ago, like 30 years ago. They could dig that up, dig up some other book he wrote when he was a priest, and they can put that all over the news everywhere. But they couldn't dig up this? Or could they, but they just didn't want to report on it? Those are questions to consider. Again, I have to ask the question with my analogy. If you're accused of being caught with a prostitute in the front seat of your vehicle, a dead body in your trunk, and weed in your car's ashtray, and you only address the weed accusation and just say, I didn't inhale, but you don't address the prostitute and you don't address the dead body in your trunk, what does that say about those accusations made about you? Another question is, if this is true about Cardinal Muller with the money in his account, should Pope Francis have had pursued legal recourse against him or disciplined him immediately and publicly and immediately had him removed? Should he have done that? Also, Cardinal Pell came on for the Secretariat of Economy, I believe, in 2014. And that's kind of what initiated all this, is the work that he was doing. That's what uncovered a lot of this. But then we find out Pell was falsely accused of inappropriate behavior. Do you think that was related to this situation? Is it possible that Cardinal Pell was finding out that some cardinals were doing this, allegedly, and maybe they stirred some stuff up to make accusations against them? I'm just asking questions. Just asking questions. Some more questions for you. When Mueller was upset with Pope Francis because he didn't tell him why his term wasn't renewed, but he failed to mention all this other stuff, do you feel that's a disingenuous? If all this stuff about Mueller is true, and then he pretended in the media that Pope Francis is somehow persecuting him and not treating him right, do you think that this was disingenuous on his part? Also, do you think this is why we saw after 2017, again, he was not renewed in 2017. Pope Francis had him retire effectively, removed him at least from the dicastery, gave him another appointment, but he didn't accept it. Well, my question is, since we saw he used to be faithful to the magisterium, but after 2017, he starts to become a dissenter, publicly and falsely accusing the magisterium of heresy and everything else. We see that after 2017. Do you think that that shift that we saw in two very different Cardinal Muellers, the one who was defending Amor Laetitia and then the one who started to turn against Pope Francis and Amor Laetitia, that Cardinal Muller, the one who completely changed after 2017, do you think that shift in Cardinal Muller had something to do with this term not being renewed? Just asking questions. Another question for you. Do you think it's hypocritical for Cardinal Muller to engage in these dubia fiascos and all the chaos that happened as a result from them? Do you think it's disingenuous to do that, but then not respond to the pillars, accusations, and every one of them, and just dismiss them as defamation? Do you think that's dishonest? And are you also seeing some parallels between how, so far at least, Cardinal Muller is handling this situation with accusations made about him, and also how Vigano has handled accusations made about him in relation to him not doing anything about McCarrick, knowing about McCarrick, not doing anything about McCarrick, could have done something about McCarrick, but didn't do anything about McCarrick, and then shifted the blame onto somebody else? Do you think there's some parallels? Those are some questions to consider. So, I hope, I pray sincerely that what will happen is Cardinal Muller will hear some of these concerns. And instead of going this direction of, it's just defamation, it's already been addressed. Instead of going that route, let's take these accusations seriously, even if they're not authentic. Let's take them seriously if we want to be transparent. If we really care about financial corruption and we want to be transparent, let's go ahead and address them head on and address those big ones, not the stupid table accusation. Let's address the big ones. Was there money put into your account? If so, why? And where did that money come from, by the way? How did all of a sudden this money get into the possession of the DDF? Where did it come from? Address all of those things that I said he has not addressed yet. Did Pope Francis tell you to put that money back? All of that. Address all of that. And we'll go from there. We'll evaluate what he says at that point. If it checks out, hey, God bless him. God bless him. If he's in the clear, cool. I hope that's the case. But if he doesn't do that, what does that tell you about Cardinal Muller at that point? I think you know what that tells you at that point. I think you know. Then I also have to say, who else was corrupt? If this is true, who else was corrupt? Who else did Pope Francis not renew? Who else did Pope Francis remove from the Vatican? Who else did he uncover was problematic? Who else was corrupt? Because we're hearing it's not just him. We're hearing it's others. We're hearing that there were other issues, other dicasteries, other heads, other people. Who else? Now you have to then ask the question, okay, yesterday you didn't know any of this, did you? Yesterday you didn't know any of this about Mueller, these accusations. So now you have to ask today, what else do I not know about certain cardinals and bishops? Is there something else out there? Maybe, maybe not. Could there be? Because yesterday I didn't know any of this about Mueller. Now I'm hearing some serious allegations that he hasn't sufficiently addressed, and I have to take it seriously. Well, I didn't know that about Mueller yesterday. In fact, I didn't know about it until today, even though this has been out 3 days. I didn't know about it until today. Who else? Who else has been pushing against Pope Francis? Who else has been stirring up dissent? Who might also have information about them that just hasn't come out yet? Speculation, but it's a sincere question that you honestly need to ask. Because if you can be blindsided by this information about Cardinal Mueller accusations, if you can be blindsided by these alleged accusations, what else might you be blindsided by? If you thought Mueller was good and you're taking these allegations seriously and you think he hasn't sufficiently addressed them, who else do you also think is good that may have some issues surrounding them? Because we're told there's more. I suspect we're going to find out more, not just in relation to Mueller. I suspect we're going to find out more information about others. And then lastly, I want to call on the industry of papal slanderers who are very quick to report on Fernandez's kissy book. I want to call on them to address this issue. They'll talk about Betchu, they'll talk about all these other guys, but will they talk about this situation surrounding Mueller? If they don't, you know they're being disingenuous. All right, y'all. Hit the like button. Hit the subscribe button. You know I'm going to take a lot of heat just for doing this show. You know I already have taken a lot of heat. From Cardinals on down, I've taken heat. You already know that. And you know I'm going to take more for this, especially this one. So I ask you to help out by hitting the subscribe button and consider supporting me at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. I have Cardinals calling for my cancellation. I have YouTubers calling for my cancellation, all that. Consider supporting the channel if you found this helpful, if you found it beneficial, if you want to support what I'm doing here so that I can continue to do what I'm doing. Please consider supporting me and also hit that subscribe button. All right. God bless. Hey friends, do you want others to discover why the Catholic Church is the church that Jesus established? And do you want to help people make sense of all the confusion in the Catholic Church today? Help contribute to this mission by supporting Reason and Theology at patreon.com/Reason and Theology. By doing so, you'll also get access to exclusive content for patrons only. Also, if you want to deepen your faith, there are free ebooks and even courses that you can sign up for by visiting reason.podia.com.